Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Rochelle Ford, who is president of Dillard University, which is the oldest HBCU in Louisiana. Dr. Ford, it's good to see you. We are talking about the resignation of Claudine Gay as president of Harvard. I wanted to start with a statement that Reverend Al Sharpton made earlier about how he felt this was an attack on all Black women who had put a crack in the glass ceiling. Does that resonate with you?
Unfortunately, African American women, when we achieve roles of leadership, we oftentimes get attacked in a major way. Women in America in general are attacked
Yeah.
for just being and making changes and breaking down glass ceilings. Women, if you notice, all of the presidents that sat before Congress were what? Were women. There are many Ivy League male presidents. They were all
Yeah.
women who were
Yeah.
there. But when you're an African American woman, African Americans still face systemic racism in America. We have made so much progress. And at the same time, when you step into a leadership role, people see this color of your skin and different standards and expectations are set. They see that you're a woman and different expectations are set just because of perceived biases that people have. Now, the beautiful thing about Dr. Gay, the beautiful thing about all of the women presidents, and particularly African American women presidents, is that we've earned these roles with solid research, with great leadership skills. You don't actually have to be a scholar to be a college president. There are many effective college presidents out there who are not scholars, have never published a referee journal article, never taught it in the classroom. But many of us did what we were trained to do as scholars, as teachers, as academic leaders, and have earned these positions. And we're ready and we're courageous leaders. And it's unfortunate that her tenure, it's a sad day in America, that her tenure was cut short 6 months into her presidency.
So, President Ford, one question that has come up, as you know, is it seems the allegations of plagiarism really seem to be what really pushed her and pushed a lot of people to want her out of this role. Do you feel that those allegations were unfair or unfounded?
One of the things about higher education is that when you are a student, and some of the allegations came from when she was a student working her dissertation, right? That is not her own piece of research. She had a committee whose job it was to ensure that it was a reliable, valid piece of research. She had advisors, she had committee members who had to judge that it was worthy of her earning a doctorate. If she's being criticized for that piece of work, that body of scholars should also receive the criticism. Books that we as scholars produce at most research universities, they have to be refereed, I mean, they have to go through an academic peer review process that other scholars who are experts in that area say that that is a solid piece of research. You can also look at refereed journal articles, the same thing. It's called peer review research. When you present out a paper at a conference, most of those go through a blind peer review. They don't even know your name as a scholar, and they say that this piece of research should be discussed. So the fact that this is coming up, 1997, where Turnitin didn't even exist as a tool to see what the likely, content might be, similarity index is coming up, is unfortunate. Because I know as a leader, as a college president, someone who went from assistant professor all the way to full professor, had been an academic chair, had been an associate dean of research, who has been a dean of a college and then became president of a university. I know that I'm a good teacher and I feel like I've contributed something as a scholar, but you know what that helps me the most as being president?
What?
It's not that piece of scholarship. It's the leadership that I displayed that I could get students excited about learning and achieving and going after internships and jobs and research experiences, that I could get my faculty, galvanized around a strategic plan and wanting to improve the conditions of the university, that I could get staff excited about new building projects or about partnerships that we can really make our universities not an ivory tower, but make a real impact on the communities in which we serve. That's what makes you a president, not your research.
Well, what makes you raise an interesting point, because when it comes to being a leader, it does seem like there were a number of people on campus and off that were not finding her leadership to be effective, perhaps in light of the reaction to the congressional testimony, the questions around plagiarism, etc. I mean, how it's a difficult, to your point, it's a difficult role to be a college president of any college in the U.S. these days. How do you think she fared as a leader in the role that you're talking about, which is engaging multiple stakeholders on campus and off?
Because I'm not at Harvard, I cannot speak to her ability specifically. But what I will say is that the excitement and energy, I was there at her inauguration. Mm-hmm. There were many female presidents who they themselves went and represented their universities as delegates at her inauguration. The excitement of a new day at Harvard, where women's voices were voices of immigrants, because her family immigrated to this country, were voices of people of color, so that I, as a descendant of a slave, could see myself reflected up there as the president of the oldest university in America. There was such excitement and joy, and that happened the last weekend in September.
Yeah.
So to go from there to where we are today is that we have fallen into soundbite. We have fallen into a world where what you read in a tweet, an Instagram post, a TikTok, we have fallen prey to a soundbite culture where higher education was built upon dialogue. Higher education was built upon critical thinking, about having discussions, about creating brave spaces where you can understand the economic, the political, the cultural, the psychological, all of the background of an issue at hand, and begin to really wrestle with it. And when we fall prey to sound bites, we are hurting democracy because we're failing to listen to each other, to lean into nuance. And I think that there was not enough time for her to demonstrate how she was going to bring everybody back together, to have those real conversations, to bring an opportunity for people of very different backgrounds to learn how we can live in harmony, how we can learn to respect each other, how we can lean in and love, how we lean in and forgive and show humility in all of it.
I think you raise an excellent point, because I'm coming to this cold. I'm not in the world of academia, but I do recall early on there was a lot of discussion about the state of free speech on the Harvard campus, again, respecting the fact, President Ford, you are at Dillard, you're not at Harvard. But how do you measure the tone of free speech and dialogue on campus? Because Harvard was ranked last on some metrics. I don't know if they're fair metrics, to be honest. But it does raise questions as to whether they were having the kind of dialogue that you're talking about.
It's difficult to know what happens in every single classroom. It's difficult to know what happens in every single dorm room. It's difficult to know what are the conversations that are happening in the lunchrooms and in the places where students and faculty are interacting in the workforce. It's impossible to know what's happening in each of these areas. It is very easy to pick samples and say that is illustrative of. What I do know is that Critical thinking happens through challenging people's perspectives. Critical thinking happens from reading research and information that you normally would never dare to pick up and read and engage with, and to compare and to contrast. Those things are happening on college campuses all around the world, whether the most conservative universities, what are the most liberal universities, those that might be Mormon or Christian or Jewish or Methodist like Dillard or United Church of Christ. We're having these conversations. And that's the beauty of a university, regardless of what others might rank us as. Rankings are problematic in general.
Yep.
A lot of people are pulling out of rankings. A lot of schools never get ranked by the level of free speech. But what I will
It's true.
say,
There's a, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, but what I will say is that it's happening even if others don't recognize that it's happening or in the way in which they want it to happen.
The genesis of this particular spotlight, and of course, Harvard, MIT, those are schools, UPenn, that get into the spotlight quite frequently, is this perceived and real rise of anti-Semitism on campus. Do you see that yourself? Is that a concern that you've had to deal with?
So when I became president in 2022 at Dillard University, one of the first things that I did as president was to revise, bring back to life our National Center for Black Jewish Relations. It was established back in the 1980s by Samuel Du Bois Cook, who's one of our former presidents at Dillard University, who had classmates at Dr. King, who studied underneath a Jewish American at The Ohio State University, the first Black faculty member at Duke University. And what I saw was a rise of anti-Semitism and a rise of racism in this country. And when we see hate growing, somebody needs to act courageously, needs to stand up and say, end hate. And so we reestablished the center in January of 2023 because there is a rise in anti-Semitism. There's a rise in racism. There's a rise in Islamophobia. There's a rise in anti-Palestinian hate. What we have to make sure that we do is we don't fight each other, that we lean in and join together to end hate, to fight racism, to fight anti-Semitism, to fight Islamophobia. Because wherever there is hate, people who want to destroy America are going to pit Jews against Muslims, Muslims against Christians, Christians against Mormons, Mormons
I know, it
against
feels very tribal, doesn't it?
It is.
I agree.
It's going to destroy democracy. We have to work together.
Let me go back for a moment to Dr. Gay and just these issues that you're raising that are very powerful. And when I've seen the comments and a lot of the commentary around her, there's so much hate against DEI as a concept. Obviously, we're coming out of a year where there have been big challenges to affirmative action, and this general sense, which I think you touched on earlier in the conversation, of the people who get these roles don't deserve them. It's almost like because we are women or Black women that by default people assume you got there through means other than through your scholarship, etc. It's it almost feels existential at this point. I'm curious to get your thoughts on what is the future of the importance of recognizing the need for diversity with the questions that it's caused and this blowback we're seeing.
It's critical that we move towards an inclusive community of thinkers. In other words, I need to respect you for your background as a woman, whatever your ethnic background is. I don't know. You look white appearing, but you may not
Canadian.
Okay, as a Scottish Canadian, I need to respect you and what you bring to the table, your regionality, whoever it is that you say you are. I need to respect that and allow you to be best at what you do. and bring your whole self to work so that you don't have to cloak whether you're single or married or you're a dog owner or a cat owner. You should be accepted in the workplace, and your ideas ought to be able to be expressed. And if someone disagrees with them, they should be able to challenge you, and you should have the right to respond and the right to change your mind. And they should have the right to change their mind. It's about having an inclusive place where people can bring their whole selves to work, to bring their whole selves to school, and to be able to learn about themselves. And so
I
no
agree.
one
What about
fights
DEI
against
though?
that. But that is the I. And
That's the I for sure.
in order to get to the I, you have to recognize that we're different. And that being different is not me being better than you. Me being different than you is not being worse than you. Me being different than you does not mean I'm taking anything away from you. All it's saying is that I'm going to respect you for being you. And guess what? There's diversity within white America.
I agree with you, and I think you and I are both on the same page with that respect. I think the challenge is, should we and recognize, race as an important factor when we are looking for excellence in leadership on college campuses? Because in the same way that this is perceived as an attack on black women, on women, you mentioned at the start, the only people who were testifying before Congress were three women new to their jobs as well. But this sense that there's no place for race as a consideration when choosing a president, that seems to be one of the conclusions that's being drawn. I'm curious if you think that's a dangerous conclusion, or if you have any thoughts on the role of frankly seeking out to people who are not white men to lead these institutions.
I think we need to seek out great candidate pools to lead institutions. Wherever I've been, I have found diverse talent. White males, black males, Asian females, Asian males, black women. I have found talent to bring to the table. And it wasn't simply because they were there because they represented a particular racial or ethnic group. They were great at what they did.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Gay is a great scholar. Dr. Gay was a great leader of the faculty at Harvard. She earned her way to that position. She brought added value as the daughter of immigrants. She brought added value because of her experiences as a woman. She brought added value because she brought diversity of thought to the table. When we have universities or businesses that everyone comes from the exact same background, you're not going to have diversity of thought because we all
I agree with you.
the same way. So, but when you mix it up and you get outside of your comfort zone to say, hey, consider joining our team. We want something and someone who's going to look at a problem differently. It adds value. So it doesn't have to always be along racial lines. It could be along lines of nationality, gender, sexual orientation, regionality, what have you. Dillard's a historically black college, right? But at Dillard, my students from New York are very, very different than my students from New Orleans, as my students from LA are.
I appreciate that. I guess I want to make sure, as we sort of, the arc of this conversation, one of the dominant themes now coming out in reaction to the resignation of Dr. Gay is that DEI is dead, should be dead. Her appointment was seen as a DEI appointment, unfairly so, I think a lot of people would suggest. But for the reasons you mentioned earlier in the conversation, when a black woman comes into a role like that, there's a group of people who will immediately diminish her as being a DEI hire. So where does the conversation go now? Is it important if Harvard goes and picks a white man to be president? I know the acting president is currently. Will that be a loss in your mind, or does it matter?
It's a loss that we lost Dr. Gay as president. period. So no matter what happens next, it's a sad day in America that her tenure was so short.
Yeah.
That's what's sad. What happens next is we need to make sure that Harvard finds someone who is committed to ensuring that there's going to be an inclusive environment where students can learn and grow together, that there will be brave spaces where those kind of dialogues can happen on campus, where we can seek to understand different perspectives and act courageously to make this world better.
Yeah.
That's what will be the symbol of success. Would I like it to be another African American woman? Sure, why not? You know, I would love to see more women. I would love to see more African Americans in leadership roles. The key thing is finding the person who is going to have a worldview where people can bring their whole selves to Harvard, right?
I cannot
And
think
they
of a
can
better
thrive.
place to end than that. I think that's a very powerful message. I agree with you. And I really thank you for bringing your perspective on, a very difficult time, because to your point, there was a lot of hope invested in Claudine Gay as president of Harvard. And I'm sure that in addition to those hopes being dashed, there's a lot of concern about the future from here.
Absolutely, but we can get better, and we will.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it, President Ford.
Thank you.